Round of applause again for Mark Di Mayuga, please. Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Ching, and I am your next presenter. The topic this afternoon is common problems encountered during the acceptance of procured election-related goods and services and their prescribed solutions. Yesterday, we had a refresher on procurement guidelines. This morning, we delve on the process flow of acceptance of non-election related goods. For this afternoon's session, we will focus on acceptance of election-related procured goods. Nadia, please. Next slide. Please allow me to share a brief history of the Reception and Verification Committee. We have all heard from yesterday's session with Helen Aguila Flores on the uniqueness of Comelec. What I will discuss now, again, adds to the uniqueness of Comelec. In 2003, the Commission and Bank created 4 election working committees through Resolution 6435. The election working committees were created to undertake pre-election, election, and post-election activities, all in the warehouses. These are the Allocation Committee, the Printing Committee, the Reception and Verification Committee, and the Packing and Shipping Committee. The Allocation Committee, headed by Director Esther Rojas and Director Celio B. Romero of the Election Records and Statistics Department, is usually the complete cycle, which is crucial to the success of the conduct of the elections. The concept behind the Reception and Verification Committee is pursuant to COA circulars and the Manual of Procedure for the Procurement of Goods, requiring the creation of an inspection committee. Who is the RVC? You can actually see in front of you the functions of the Reception and Verification Committee, but I would like to point out, I think notable of all the functions of the Reception and Verification Committee is together with them. I think notable also is the coordination with other election working committees and end users on the technical elections. The Reception and Verification Committee facilitated the reception and verification of 47 different types of supplies, 27 different types of AES-related goods, 20 different forms, 24 different envelopes, and 12 signages. This does not include, and I have not enumerated, the services, official ballots, and accountable forms. Next slide, please. Please allow me to... Lahat na, Nadia. Please just allow me to present to you a shortened process flow of how the process flow leading towards the issuance of an acceptance and inspection report, or the A. We start, of course, with the arrival of forms and supplies, and we are provided with source documents by the Procurement Management Department, and we conduct preliminary verification of the documents, forms, and supplies. We receive the delivery, we unload it and receive the delivery based on quantity initially. furnish the Commission on Audit, the Property Division of the ASD, and the Accounting Division with copies of the delivery receipts. The Property Inspector retrieves samples for DOST testing, and we also conduct a parallel technical specification verification together with the end user. Next slide, please. We also coordinate with the suppliers for replacement of goods that are defective, described as defective, or did not conform to the technical specifications. And we issue the AIR, which, as I've said a while ago, is crucial for payment. Next slide. Please. Is in the delivery receipts and improper packaging and handling. Next slide, please. And here are our recommendation or prescribed solutions. For delivery, logistical delays, should be made in accordance with the prescribed schedule, which is actually an annex to the contract. We highly recommend that Comelec timelines should always be taken into consideration during the bidding process. Factor in also the verification process. Because pag nagsabay-sabay po yung mga goods and supplies, it will definitely take time. We have also found that there are usual delivery receipts errors in the data in the delivery receipts. Our recommendation is to pursuant to COA circular, delivery receipts must be pre-numbered, conform with the order or the contract, and the details must conform also with, all the details must conform with those in the order and the contract. The supplier should also ensure that the date and receipt of the items delivered are duly acknowledged by their RVC and the property inspector. We also encounter improper packaging and handling. COA Circular 92-386 prescribes that all supplies should be adequately contained, packed, crated, bundled, wrapped, or sealed to prevent damage, spoilage, and loss. They must be plainly labeled and marked on the outside, showing the exact contents. Next slide, please. We now go to verification or inspection. Our commonly encountered issues are really on the technical non-conformity with the technical specifications. There are actually two types, patent and latent. When we say patent, I think we all know that it's a visible flaw that you see directly with your naked eye. What we usually look for are the following. Is this brand new or it was just rebuilt? Are there obvious damages or defects? Are the parts or the accessories complete? And if there is discoloration, stain, and decay due to exposure. I recently encountered that there was a delivery made where most of the goods, when it was unloaded by the delivery personnel, most of the goods had scrapes, grazing, and denting. So sayang naman kasi syempre those would definitely be rejected. We highly advise that although we acknowledge that most of the delivery trucks or the delivery personnel are subcontracted, we highly advise that the delivery personnel should be briefed or trained on the loading and unloading to avoid handling damage. These are those that are not readily seen or visible or detectable by the eye. Usually it requires DOST testing and a more thorough verification process by the RVC and the end user. We highly encourage the following. Make sure that the physical count or the quantity delivered are exactly as the same in the PO or in the contract. Make sure also that the goods pass the patent nonconformity testing parameters, meaning there must be no visible flaw. Goods must pass every requirement stated in the specification, and goods must pass the DOST testing whenever applicable. Here are some of the testing that we have conducted with DOST. I think for those who test, we also do kilometric testing for pens, chemical testing, usually for indelible ink, and concave thickness for the ballot box. Next slide, please. I think I'm down to my last 4 slides, and then the singer will come back. So here are just very few encountered issues, delays in the delivery of replacement, and the replacements still do not conform to the required specification. In my more than 10 years of experience as Reception Verification Committee Chairperson, I have never encountered a supplier, a Comelec supplier, who did not readily replace all the defects. Lahat naman po ng supplier readily and eagerly would replace the goods. Rarely also that the replacements do not conform to the technical specifications. Just an advice on this. During the procurement of goods, we highly encourage that the bidder should do a thorough clarification of the specifications and ask for what the testing parameters will be. Para lang po pag nag-send ng another round of replacements, the goods will definitely pass already the verification process. Next slide, please. We have taken the liberty of summarizing the entire presentation in just through this acronym ACT. This entire session could be summarized through ACT. Check the accuracy and completeness of the documents, ensure the right physical count, and ensure the conformity to technical specification. I would like to conclude this session by saying that there is really nothing more that we, the Commission on Elections, would want than to be true to our mandate of upholding good governance and public accountability. I hope that after having shared our reminders and tips today, we can all work together towards this end. The RVC, or the Reception and Verification Committee, takes this opportunity to thank its election partners, the suppliers, for not giving us a hard time when we demand for replacements and such. And most especially to the silent workers of the warehouse, the election working committees, allocation, printing, reception and verification, and packing and shipping committee, who have toiled day and night at the warehouse to ensure the success of the elections. We also extend our appreciation to the Procurement Management Department, who, while they are not physically at the warehouse, were with the election working committees in spirit as they monitor the entire process from allocation down to shipment. Thank you very much, and may we all have an eventful afternoon ahead.
Of payments prepared by the Chief Accountant of the Voucher Processing Department of the Finance Services Department, Mr. Danilo Lustre.
Hello po. Good afternoon po to our Comelec officials. Good afternoon po. My topic is on the internal processes of the flow of transactions for payments. So yung pong mga nag-provide po ng mga goods and services sa commission, medyo dito kayo interesado kasi payments po ito eh. For our bidders and prospective bidders, we'll give you an insight on our process of payments in the commission, kung saan pong mga offices dumadaan yung mga dokumento. For your information po, ang nagpe-prepare po ng mga financial documents, ang PMD po, ang Procurement Management Department. We'll also give you some information on the fundamental principles on the disbursement of government funds. Medyo hindi ko na po siya i-expound dahil explanatory naman po siya. I have prepared a audio presentation for my topic. Pwede na po.
The payment process, the requirements, and the procedures of payments. Let's start. In the processing of payments for the Commission's obligations, the Finance Services Department, through the Voucher Processing Division, have to ensure the legality, propriety, and the validity of the claims. The Commission on Audit has issued the circular to prescribe the guidelines and documentary requirements for government transactions. Here too are the fundamental principles governing the financial transactions and operations of any government agency, as provided under Section 4 of the Presidential Decree number 1445. Number 1, no money shall be paid out of any public treasury or depository except in pursuance of an appropriation law or other specific statutory authority. Number 2, government funds or property shall be spent or used solely for public purposes. Number 3, fiscal responsibility shall to the greatest extent be shared by all those exercising authority over the financial affairs, transactions, and operations of the government agency. Claims against government funds shall be supported with complete documentations. All laws and regulations applicable to financial transactions shall be faithfully adhered. Generally accepted accounting principles and practices, as well as of sound management and fiscal administration, shall be observed, provided that they do not contravene existing laws and regulations. Here too also are the general requirements for all types of disbursement. 1, certificate of availability of funds issued by the chief accountant. 2, existence of lawful and sufficient allotment duly obligated as certified by authorized official. 3, legality of transaction and conformity with laws, rules, or regulations. 4, approval of expenditure by head of office or his authorized representative. 5, sufficient and relevant documents to establish validity of claims. Here are 2 mandatory forms prescribed by the Commission on Audit to be submitted when claiming for payments of obligations against the Commission. The disbursement voucher is a form used to pay an obligation to employees, individuals, agencies, creditors for goods purchased or services rendered. The obligation request and status form shall be used in the utilization of approved budget allocations of the requesting office. These two forms shall be prepared by the requesting office unit, and the concerned official will sign on the box A of both forms, and together with original supporting documents, it will be forwarded to the Finance Services Department through the Voucher Processing Division for the processing of the claim. Here too is the manual procedure in the process of payments. Number one, the Voucher Processing Division will acknowledge the receipt of the claim and records the receipt of the disbursement voucher. The receiving releasing clerk will make an initial evaluation of the DB and the ORS to see if these documents are properly signed by an authorized official, and then perform the following tasks. Number one, stamp the date and time of receipt. Two, assign the reference control number, the DB. Three, records the details of the claim in the respective logbook, indicating the date and time received, the reference number, originating office, the name of payees, the particulars of claim, and the amount of claim. BPD has a ready checklist slip for this type of claim for the guidance of the processor, and the receiver will attach this slip to the DB and then forward the same to the assigned processor. Once the processor received the disbursement voucher, she will evaluate and process the claim based on the mandatory supporting documents as required by COA circular. This checklist will be attached to the disbursement voucher for the guidance of the processor. You can see the checklist for payments of the purchase orders, job order contracts, contract of service, and lease of venue. After determining the completeness of the attached documents and the accuracy of the computation of the amount, including its deductions, if any, the processor will record the process claim to the index of payments of the claimant for reference. If the claims failed or lack supporting documents, a memo slip is prepared to state the reasons therein and return the disbursement voucher and supporting documents to the originating office. If the claim passed the processing guidelines, it will be forwarded to the assistant chief for review. After the review of the assistant chief, it will be initialed and forwarded to the chief accountant for final review and approval by signing the box C portion of the disbursement voucher and then forwarding the same to the releasing clerk for proper transmittal to the budget division for fund allotment and obligation. The chief of the budget division, after determining the available allotment, will record the obligations in their books and then sign the box B portion of the ORS and forward the same to the concerned office of the approving official to sign on the box D of the disbursement voucher. For any amount of claim up to 200,000, the approving official is the Director 3 of the Finance Services Department. In the absence of Director 3, the alternate is the Director 4 of the FSD. For the amount of above 200 to 500,000, the approving official is the Deputy Executive Director for Administration, or DEDA. And if the absence of DEDA, the alternate is the Deputy Executive Director for Operations, or if the absence of the two, the alternate official is the executive director. For 500,000 to 1 million payments, the approving official is the executive director. In his absence, his alternate is the deputy executive director for operations. Payments for above 1 million, the approving official is the Comelec chairman. In case the chairman is absent, the alternate official is the executive director. Once the approving official signs the box D of the disbursement voucher, the claim will be forwarded to the data processing division of the Finance Services Department for the preparation of the automatic debit account in the name account of the claimant and submit forward the same to the servicing bank of the commission. The claim is considered paid, settled once the servicing bank received the ADA unless some minor problems where the claimant cannot withdraw from the bank. That is all for the payment process in the commission. Marami pong salamat.
Thank you po, Sir Danilo Lustre. Meron po bang questions from our suppliers? Respond sanctions, suspension, and blacklisting, prepared by Mr. Emerito Toscano, Supervising Administrative Officer of the Contract Management Division of the Procurement Management Department.
Thank you, Attorney Divine. Diane Brother. Magandang hapon po. Ako po ang natasang mag-present nitong Common Contract Administrative Offenses and its Sanctions. Sana mag-present na ako ng audiovisual. But then, nandito na rin lang naman, then I will say hi sa mga suppliers, mga olds, yung mga new, welcome po sa Procurement Summit. Natutuwa po ako personally na nagkaroon ng first Procurement Summit. First time po talaga yan sa aking 24 years na yata. Sir Boyet, kabats yata kita eh. So, ang pagpasok sa Comelec, alam nyo naman yung mga suppliers sa una, para kayong nanliligaw, gustong-gusto nyong may posting ng procurement sa Comelec. Then, sasali kayo sa bidding, gusto nyong manalo, ang una nyong step na gustong makamtan ay maging eligible. Naging eligible kayo, then magkakaroon kayo ng lowest calculated bid na notice, tapos post-qualified. Then, notice of award. Pag notice of award na, wala na yung no contact rule, okay na. So, ang kausap nyo na sa Comelec, kami na yung contract management kung saan kami nag-prepare ng contract, then NTP hanggang sa contract monitoring. So, pag pirma nyo ng NOAA, mayroon na agad 10 calendar days in which you have to post yung performance security and sign the contract. Nagsisimula na agad doon yung timelines ng contract implementation. And then, mayroon na tayong contract, may signing na. Then mayroon pa tayong 7 days after signing ng contract in which to issue naman yung NTP. So 7-10 days na. Sabi ko nga, ang nahalata ko sa Comelec Procurement, during the pre-bid, maraming nag-raise ng issue tungkol sa delivery schedule. Ang nakalagay sa bidding docs namin, nakalagay doon 60 days. Some of you will request 120 days. So si BAC naman mag-issue ng bid bulletin para equal footing, alam niyo lahat ang terms ni Comelec, sasagutin kayo, no, 60 days lang. Then you join the bidding, magka-award. Kung magka-award kayo, may NTP na. So habang ginagawa itong steps na to, baka hindi baka meron kayong mga admin offenses na nagagawa dahil lang sa guys nang kayo ay nagkakandak lang ng business. Gusto nyo lang magka-negosyo, then pagka na-estimate tamang ginagawa. So, i-share ko lang. Ito lang po, actual lang. Kung minsan sasabihin ng supplier, nakalip kasi yung aming authorized representative. Kaya hindi muna nakapag-submit ng performance security. O kaya, simple, yung messenger namin, kasali sana sa routing. Hindi lang inabot, kaya hindi kami nakapag-submit ng performance security. Simple lang po yun. Pero it will take a lot of time para hindi agad ma-issue yung NTP kasi, di ba? Bago magkaroon ng contract, dapat may performance security muna. So, pagkaroon na ng NTP na, that's the time na mag-commence na yung official delivery period doon sa contract. So, si supplier naman, you have the privilege naman to ask for extension of delivery. Pag nag-extend ng delivery period, pwede kayong i-deny ni Comelec. Halimbawa, yung request nyo pa rin is 120 days. Pero in fact, doon sa bid bulletin, sabi namin 60 days lang. So prerogative ni Comelec lang kung i-approve o hindi yung inyong request. So pag dinis-approve ka, those 60 days lang yung period mo. And after 60 days, hindi ka naka-deliver, pagsisimula na yung tinatawag na liquidated damages, which is 1/10 of 1% of every day of delay. Ngayon, may twist yan. Pag umabot yan ng 10% ng contract price, ang contract mo is subject to termination by default. So pag by default ang grounds ng termination, automatic yun, sa dulo niyan, blacklisting po yun. So iingatan nyo po yung mag-terminate ng contract by default sa kontratang pinasok nyo sa Comelec. So yun po yung isang cycle kung saan makikita yung mga admin offenses and its sanction. Anyway, may kaming audiovisual presentation. We'll just stop kung ano man ang makita natin pwedeng banggitin. Basta si contract implementation po, ang mga possible offenses nyo during the implementation, step by step, meron po, bawat step ng contract implementation, meron pong mga admin offenses na pwedeng magawa si supplier. And these are those things. Ma'am Nadia, makiplay po.
To the second day of this procurement summit. For today's discussion, let us talk about common contractor or consultant and its sanctions during contract implementation. Under the administrative offenses committed during contract implementation and its sanctions, let us discuss the following. First, common offenses. Second, administrative sanctions. Third, contract terminations. And fourth, blacklisting during contract implementation. During contract implementation, the following are the common administrative offenses of suppliers. While it may seem trivial, these acts are considered as factors that tend to prolong the completion of the contractual obligation of the supplier. If we are hesitant to the procurement project, why join the bidding and later refuse to accept the following? First, notice of award. Second, job order. Third, purchase order. And fourth, notice to proceed. If not refusal, suppliers tend to delay the acceptance of the following same documents. First, notice of award. Second, job order. Third, purchase order. And fourth, notice to proceed, or delayed in first, posting performance security, or have posted performance security but delayed the signing of contract and notarization. After signing the purchase order, job order, for alternative mode of procurement, or notice to proceed for public bidding, failure to deliver within the prescribed delivery period as stated in the contract agreement, purchase order, job order, or memorandum of agreement. In the event that supplier is unable to meet with the delivery schedule, a request for extension may be submitted, subject to compliance to condition and approval of the approving authority. The Commission may decide to terminate the contract if it does not conform to the delivery schedule. Delivery of not compliant items that is not in accordance with the contract. The Commission is strict in ascertaining compliance of deliveries. of suppliers as a way of testing, verification, and evaluation. The Comelec submits samples of the deliveries to competent laboratories accredited by the Department of Science and Technology to ensure that a reliable and competent testing conducted that will ascertain the compliance to the technical specification. If found not to be compliant, the Comelec will immediately reject the deliveries and will direct the supplier to replace the delivered items. In rare or isolated cases, suppliers are unable to deliver items due to non-availability of stocks and likewise proposes an alternative.
Ayun po. Yun pong nakalagay dyan na failure to deliver within the prescribed delivery period. Yun sinasabi ko kanina. So, 100 days from the last day ng delivery period, approve man o hindi, abutin nyo yung 10% liquidity damages. So subject na yan sa pagbantayan nyo yan, will be subjected to termination ng contract. Na ang end game niyan is blacklisting. Ito naman non-compliant of items, ano naman na ang rule natin dyan reject and replace. Pag nag-deliver kayo na hindi compliant, reject yan. So yun nga, sometimes nag-offer ng ibang model yung supplier. Actually, pwede naman, pero subject to rules, dapat hindi masyadong bago yung terms ng procurement. Kasi ang contract po, galing po yan sa terms ng procurement. Usually, dapat hindi binabago yung terms ng contract na mababago materially maapektuhan yung procurement terms. So pag nag-propose ka ng ibang item, it should be advantageous sa Comelec. Kasi halimbawa, nag-offer yung isang bidder ng Model 1. During the contract implementation, sasabihin niya, hindi available sa market. But mo in-offer in the first place. Tapos yung ibang bidder naman, hindi na sumali kasi wala siyang ganong model. So wala na yung contract sa kanya. So naapektuhan na yung equal footing nyo sa bidding. Nagkaroon ka ng advantage kaysa doon sa hindi sumali. So yun po ang restriction ng pagbigay ng panibagong model pag kayo ay nasa contract implementation na. Yung iba naman na banggit na ni Ma'am Aget kanina, yung patent latent defects, pag ito po ay hindi mo na-comply, i-forfeit po yung warranty security.
I'll discourage any request for changes in the technical specification procurement law. However, any changes must adhere to the principle of fair competition or by ensuring that bidders shall not be in equal footing, by not amending the contract term that may materially affect the terms of the bidding. Not only that deliveries are not compliant, but are also found to be defective, which can be characterized or distinguished by patent defect, an apparent obvious to the buyer on normal observation, example, ballpen that does not write. Second, latent defect, one that is not apparent, hidden, not immediately determinable to the buyer by reasonable observation. Example, ballpen that writes 500 meters instead of the expected 750 meters. Latent effects are sometimes may only become known on the actual usage of the items. After enumerating the common administrative offenses, let's talk about sanctions. The liquidated damages under Section 68 of Republic Act Number 9184 and its revised implementing rules and regulations. 1. Imposes LD to suppliers or contractors in case of contract breach. 2. The LD computed as 1/10 of 1% or 0.001 of the cost of the unperformed portion for every day of delay. 3. LDs reaching a cumulative amount of 10% of the contract price, the procuring entity may consider contract termination. Fact: the 10% of the contract LD will only be reached if supplier fails to deliver 100 days from the last day of delivery period under the contract or approved extension of delivery of the entire deliverables under the contract. For procurement of goods, if the delivered item has patent or latent defects, the Commission will forfeit the warranty security. Administrative sanctions. After enumeration of administrative offenses, Section 69.1 of Republic Act 9184 and the violation that may be subject to to post the required performance security within the prescribed time. And C, termination of the contract due to the default of the bidder. Imposition of administrative sanctions. First offense, suspension for a period of 1 year in participating in the competitive bidding process undertaken by the procuring entity. Second offense, suspension for a period of 2 years in participating in the competitive bidding process, as well as disqualification from further participating in the competitive bidding undertaken by the procuring entity. In addition to suspension in participating in the competitive bidding process, the bidder's bid security as well as performance security may be forfeited. The Hope may delegate the authority to impose applicable administrative sanctions to the bank.
Yun pong forfeited, it should be shall na sa voice over kasi nasabi maybe. Yun lang po. Please continue, ma'am.
Security may be forfeited. The Hope may delegate the authority to impose applicable administrative sanctions to the bank. Contract termination. For contract termination, procuring entities may terminate or resign the contract with erring suppliers who have incurred a cumulative amount of LDs amounting to 10% of the contract price. Grounds for contract termination. First, termination for default. Second, termination for convenience. Third, terminations for insolvency. Fourth, termination for unlawful acts. And fifth, termination by contractor or consultant. Contract termination for default. First, as a result of force majeure or outside of force majeure. Second, the supplier fails to deliver any or all the goods and services within the prescribed period under the contract or any extension granted by the procuring entity. Third, delays or failure amounting to 10% of the contract price. Fourth, the supplier fails to perform any other contractual obligations. And fifth, if as a result outside the force majeure, the supplier or contractor is unable to deliver procured goods for a period of not less than 60 calendar days after receipt of the notice from the procuring entity stating that the circumstances of force majeure is deemed to have ceased. Contract termination for default for infrastructure projects. First, when the contractor incurred negative slippage of 15% while the project is still ongoing. Second, when the contractor incurred negative slippage of 10% when the contract period has lapsed. Third, when the contractor abandons the contract works, refuses or fails to comply even with a valid instruction from the procuring entity. And fourth, does not execute the works under the contract, refusal to remove materials that has been rejected. Contract termination for default for consulting projects. First, when the consultant fails to deliver or perform the outputs and deliverables within the prescribed period. Second, when the consultant fails to deliver or perform the outputs and deliverable within 60 days upon receipt of notice that the circumstances of force majeure is deemed to have ceased. And third, the consultant fails to perform any other contractual obligations. Contract termination for convenience. The procuring entity may terminate the contract in whole or in part at any time for its convenience. Second, if existence of conditions has been determined that make project implementation economically, financially, or technically impractical or unnecessary. Contract termination for insolvency. The procuring entity may terminate the contract if the supplier, contractor, or consultant is declared bankrupt or insolvent as determined with finality by a court of competent jurisdiction. Second, termination will be without compensation to the supplier, contractor, or consultant, provided that such termination will not prejudice or affect any right of action or remedy which has accrued or will accrue thereafter to both parties. Contract termination for unlawful acts. The procuring entity may terminate the contract in case it is determined prima facie that the supplier, contractor, or consultant has engaged in acts such as A. Corrupt, fraudulent, collusive, and coercive practices. B. Drawing up or using forged documents. C. Using adulterated materials, means, or methods, or engaging in production contrary to rules of science or the trade. And lastly, any other act analogous to the foregoing. Contract termination by consultant or contractor. For infrastructure projects, the contractor may terminate its contract with the procuring entity if works are completely stopped for a continuous period of at least 60 calendar days through no fault of its own due to the following grounds. A. Failure of the procuring entity to deliver supplies, materials, right of way, or other item it is obligated to furnish under the terms of the contract on a reasonable time frame. Or B, the prosecution of the work is disrupted by the adverse peace and order situation as certified by the AFP Provincial Commander and approved by the Secretary of National Defense. And for consulting projects, the consultant may terminate its agreement with the procuring entity. If the latter is in material breach of its obligation under the contract and has not remedied the same within 60 calendar days following its receipt of the consultant's notice specifying such breach. Procedure for termination of contracts. For purpose of ensuring procedure in the termination of contract will be properly attended to, the Hope may create the Contract Termination Review Committee, or also known as CTRC. The process involved in the contract terminations are 1. Within 7 calendar days, the end user or the implementing unit shall verify the existence of the ground for termination. 2. Based from the recommendation of the end user or the implementing unit, the Hope shall issue a notice of termination stating the grounds, the instruction to show cause, the verified report shall be attached to said notice. 3. The supplier with 7 calendar days from receipt of notice of termination shall show cause why the contract should not be terminated. 4. If suppliers comply with the deliverables, as rescission may be applicable. And 5th, 10 calendar days from receipt of verified position paper from the supplier, the Hope will decide whether to terminate partially or in full the contract or not.
Ayun po, ang termination ng contract naman, hindi naman ito arbitrary na pag sinabi naming terminated, terminated na. So meron pong specific procedure kung saan meron kayong way pa rin na to show cause kung bakit hindi dapat i-terminate ng contract at hindi lang basta-basta tini-terminate. So meron pong process yon. You have also the right to show cause para naman madinig yung inyong side. Thank you.
Takeover of contracts. If a procuring entity terminates the contract due to defaults, insolvency, or for cause, it may enter into a negotiated procurement pursuant to Section 53C of Republic Act 9184 and 53 and 3 of its IRR. Options in termination for convenience in contracts for goods. Delivered goods are ready for delivery within 30 calendar days after the supplier receipt of notice of termination shall be accepted. Cancel the remainder of the contract and receive and pay the portion delivered. If the supplier suffers loss in its initial performance, it shall be allowed to recover partially from the contract on a quantum merit basis. Notice by contractor or consultant. The contractor or consultant must serve a written notice to the procuring entity of its intention to terminate the contract at least 30 calendar days before its intended termination. The contract is deemed terminated if it's not resumed in 30 calendar days after the receipt of such notice by the procuring entity. The Government Procurement Policy Board adopted to implement an online blacklisting portal where all procuring entities can post blacklisted supplier, contractor, and consultant for widest contract implementation. GPPB Resolution Number 40-2017, dated 21st of December 2017, approves the revised guidelines for blacklisting of manufacturers, suppliers, distributors, contractors, and consultants. Now, let us define what is blacklisting. Blacklisting is an administrative penalty imposed by the procuring entity to a supplier, contractor, or consultant that disqualifies them for participating in all government bidding projects in a specific period. Contract implementation stage grounds for blacklisting. Number 1. Failure of the contractor due solely to his fault or negligence to mobilize and start work or performance within the specified period in the notice to proceed. Number 2, failure by the contractor to fully and faithfully to comply with its representative pursuant to the implementation of the contract. Number 3, assignment and subcontracting of the contract or any part thereof or substitution of key personnel named in the proposal without the prior written approval by the procuring entity. 4, for the procurement of goods and satisfactory progress in the delivery of the goods by the manufacturer, supplier, or distributor arising from his fault or negligence, or unsatisfactory or inferior quality of goods as may be provided in the contract. Number 5, for the procurement of consulting services, poor performance by the consultant of his services arising from his fault or negligence. Number 6, for the procurement of infrastructure projects, poor performance by the contractor or unsatisfactory quality or progress of work arising from his fault of negligence as reflected in the constructor performance evaluation. And lastly, number 7, willful or deliberate abandonment or non-performance of the project or contract by the contractor resulting to substantial breach thereof without lawful or just cause. In addition to the penalty of suspension, the performance security shall also be forfeited. Blacklisting for ongoing implementation. The Commission may impose blacklisting to erring suppliers due to termination of default, and blacklisting orders are to be issued within 7 calendar days from contract termination due to default. That will result to the forfeiture of performance security.
Blacklisting. Beyond the implementation period where contract termination is no longer possible, within 7 calendar days, the end user and/or the implementing unit shall verify the existence of the ground or grounds for blacklisting. Based from the recommendation of the end user and/or the implementing unit, the HOPE shall issue a notice of blacklisting stating the grounds, the instruction to show costs, and other special instruction of the procurement entity. The verified award shall be attached to said notice. The supplier within 7 calendar days from receipt of the notice of blacklisting shall show costs while the concerned supplier shall not be blacklisted. Within 10 calendar days from receipt of verified position paper from the supplier, the HOPE will decide whether to blacklist the supplier or provider or contractor. If the decision is to blacklist, the notice of blacklisting becomes final and executory after the lapse of 7 calendar days from receipt of the decision.
The blacklisting shall apply to the following persons. First, for individuals or sole proprietorship, to the bidders and their spouses. Second, for partnerships, to the partnership itself and its partners. And third, for cooperatives, to the cooperative itself and members of the board of directors, general manager, or chief executive officer. The fourth one, a partnership, joint venture, or consortium, which is blacklisted or which has blacklisted member or partners, as well as the person or entity who is a member of a blacklisted joint venture or consortium. And lastly, for corporations, a single stockholder together with his or her relatives up to the third civil degree of consanguinity or affinity, and their assignees holding at least 20% of the shares, its chairman and president shall be blacklisted after they have been determined to hold the same controlling interest in previously blacklisted corporation or in 2 corporations which have been blacklisted. The corporations of which they are part shall also be blacklisted. And now for the important reminders. First, prior to the issuance of blacklisting order, the erring contractor may participate in the procurement of any government project except in the agency where he is suspended. Second, if the BO is issued prior to the date of the notice of award, the blacklisted person or entity shall not be qualified for award in such project contract. And third, if the BO is issued after award to the blacklisted person or entity, the awarded project or contract shall not be prejudiced by the said order, provided, however, that the said offenses committed by the blacklisted person or entity are not connected with the awarded project or contract. And lastly, the effectivity period for penalty of 1 or 2 years. as the case may be, and shall be clearly specified in the blacklisting order, the commencement of which shall be the date of issuance of the blacklisting order. And for other blacklisting guidelines, pursuant to GPPB Circular Number 03-2020, that provides a guide to all procuring entities on the mandatory use of the online blacklisting portal and prescribe a non-modifiable form for blacklisting orders. Procuring entity should post its issued blacklisting order in the consolidated blacklisting report through the online blacklisting portal within 3 calendar days from its effectivity. Failure to post or non-compliance with the requirements of posting of the blacklisting order in the online blacklisting portal shall be assessed as non-compliant in the sub-indicator under the Agency Procurement Compliance and Performance Indicator System. And for any questions, please send an email to pmd.cmd@comelec.gov.ph. Thank you and a pleasant day to one and all.
Thank you for listening. So, mayroon lang akong points na i-point out ulit. Sa blacklisting, 3 stages ang pwede mong magkaroon ka ng grounds for blacklisting. Yung isa, during procurement process, na hindi naman na-discuss dito. Second, during contract implementation, na pwede kang i-terminate by default or unlawful acts. Ingatan natin to kasi ang dulo nitong dalawang grounds na to is blacklisting. Or even wala nang panahon na i-terminate ang contract at tapos na-deliver mo na, pwede ka pang i-terminate. So pwede ang tatlong phases na magkaroon tayo ng blacklisting. So ganito lang ang tip. Ano mang galaw natin na pwedeng hindi ma-achieve yung procurement projects to satisfy yung needs ng end user may be a offense during the contract implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Emmer. Now we open the Q&A part of the program. Okay. May question po tayo for the CMD, PMD kay Sir Emmer din po. This is from Johnny Ra. The bidder has a pending case or has filed a case versus Comelec. BDC, will Comelec still allow the bidder to participate in the bidding?
Ang basis po kasi para ang isang bidder is makapag-participate sa Comelec or hindi if suspended siya for the meantime or blacklisted siya. Pag hindi pa po, pwede pa pong mag-participate. Basta eligible lang siya doon sa procurement project. Thank you.
Thank you po. Sir, may isa pa po, sir. This is from Attorney Julia Rial of LG Ton Law. The question is subcontracting permissible in the procurement process of the Commission on Elections?
Sa mga past experience po, si Comelec do not allow subcontracting. Iba po, sa bidding documents, meron doon option na pwede mag-allow si Comelec or sino man na procuring entity. Pag ilagay po niya sa bidding docs with all the details kung ano ang pwedeng i-subcontract, so pwede po yon. Subject po doon sa bidding documents na ilalabas at ipopost sa procurement projects. Thank you.
Thank you po, Sir Emmer. Okay, so dun po sa may mga questions pa, pwede niyo pong ibigay yung questions niyo dun sa mga secretariat natin, yung nakatayo po dito sa gilid. Then i-email na lang po namin sa inyo yung answers. As for the presentations, from yesterday and today, namimigay na po ng USB, nandun po yung presentation para ma-review niyo po. Okay. So before the closing remarks, may I ask everyone to remain in your seats for photo opportunity after the awarding. Now, our procurement summit now draws to a close. May we again call on the Deputy Executive Director for Administration, Attorney Helen G. Aguila Flores, for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Attorney Diane. Our Honorable Chair, our ED, our DEDO, senior staff, our bidders, our NGOs, observers, everyone, good afternoon po ulit. Bilis lang ng 2 araw, no? Pasensya na po, medyo paalis-alis kami. And I'd like to tell you the reason why we had to leave the summit. Puro procurement related. We went to a meeting kanina with a partner agency and guess what? The problem was procurement related. Ngayon po si Edie nagpaalam sa akin saglit. Sasaglitin lang daw niya ang isang meeting na procurement related din. Napakahalaga ng procurement and first of all, congratulations to the Procurement Management Department and the Events Committee for this very successful summit. Job well done. Alam ko po the PMD while hosting this event is also doing procurement work. Nagda-draft sila sa isang sulok ng mga backreso, ng invitation to bid, ng mga answers to your queries. They're multitasking and so ang galing PMD, job well done, and events, thank you so much. Let me please start this closing remarks by reiterating our thanks to all of you for your time, for your effort, and for your commitment. Hindi matawaran, hindi po, no amount of words can truly express our gratitude to all of you who throughout all these past decades have been our partners in procurement. Maraming salamat po sa inyo, our bidders. Maraming salamat po. And from what we have heard, from what we have understood and learned in this 2-day summit, by now we must have realized already that successful, efficient, and responsive procurement should be the outcome of a strong and sustainable teamwork among all of us. The procuring unit or entity, the HOPE, the BAC, the PMD, the bidders, the observers, the oversight units like the COA, the JOCC, the CAC, na pagtutulong-tulungan po. Hindi pwede po na nakasalalay lang sa BAC ang success ng procurement. Kailangan po namin ang support ng end user unit at ng iba pang mga involved na offices and of course with your understanding as well, our bidders. So this teamwork, I repeat, should be strong and sustainable. Hindi yung during procurement period lang, although all year round naman talaga ang procurement natin, no? Sustainable sana po itong teamwork na to. On this note po, I hope that we will be, as we go back home to our respective offices, we proceed on with this solid teamwork spirit and a reinvigorated passion to contribute in making the procurement process in Comelec excellent and exemplary. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Now we go on to the awarding of the certificates. May we call on one by one the resource persons for the awarding of the certificates. Before that, I'll just read to you the contents of the certificate. Certificate of appreciation to all our resource persons for having shared your invaluable knowledge and expertise during the first Comelec Procurement Summit held on July 17 and 18, 2023 at the Diamond Ballroom, Diamond Hotel, Manila, given this 18th day of July 2023. Okay, I'll call now our resource person. First is Director Margaret C. Ching. Director Fritzy Claire C. Caigoy. May I request the resource person to stay on stage for the photo ops po, sabay-sabay. Okay, Attorney John Gerald B. De La Cruz. Mr. Danilo E. Lustre. Miss France Irole V. Tablante. Mr. Emerito Toscano. Wag lang po muna tayo bumaba. Wait lang po. For the bidders and suppliers daw po, for photo opportunity din daw po. Join na po kayo dito, mga love bidders and suppliers po natin.
contractors.
Ay, sige po. Nantay ko po kayo. Dito na po nagtatapos ang ating first comment. Lahat ng nakilahok, lalo na po sa ating mga suppliers and leaders, resource persons. Thank you po dahil sa inyo, naging very successful ang ating first ever Comelec Procurement Summit. Thank you. By the way, may snacks pa po. Enjoy.